The champagne flute shattered against the marble fireplace, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the cavernous penthouse. Julian Vance didn't even blink. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, adjusting his silk cufflinks, his reflection ghosting over the sprawling skyline of New York City. "You're being dramatic." "Elena, it's just a dinner. The board expects us to be seen together." Elena Sterling sat at her vanity, her back to him. She applied a coat of blood-red lipstick with surgical precision, her eyes watching him through the mirror like a hawk tracking a field mouse. "The board expects a merger. Julian, not a performance. I haven't slept in this penthouse for 3 weeks. Pretending we are a happy couple for the paparazzi is exhausting." Julian turned slowly, a smirk playing on his lips that usually charmed investors but only irritated his wife. "And where have you been sleeping? Darling, the office? Or do you have a secret lover tucked away in the Hamptons?" Elena capped her lipstick with a sharp click. If only he knew. If only he knew that for the past 3 weeks, she hadn't been sleeping at all. She had been in a damp warehouse in the Bronx, breaking the fingers of a Russian arms dealer who had dared to encroach on Argentum territory. Her body was covered in bruises hidden beneath her $1,000 Dior gown. Elena stood up, smoothing the silk over her hidden thigh holster. It was a microscopic ceramic blade, undetectable by metal detectors. Strapped to her leg, "Don't project your infidelity onto me. Julian, I have work. Real work. Unlike the charity galas you use to launder your reputation." Julian chuckled, walking over to pour himself a drink. The amber liquid swirled in the glass. He, too, was nursing a fractured rib from a brawl 2 nights ago. Being the Viper, the brutal enforcer of the Obsidian Syndicate, required a physical toll that being a CEO did not. He looked at his wife, beautiful, cold, and utterly distant. He had no idea she was the most dangerous woman in the city, the legendary assassin known as Wraith. He just thought she was a frigid workaholic. Julian raised his glass in a mock toast. "To us, the power couple of the century. May we not kill each other before dessert." Elena walked past him, her perfume leaving a trail of jasmine and something sharper like gunpowder. Though Julian dismissed the thought, she paused at the door, her hand on the handle. "Finish your drink. Julian, the car is waiting. And please, try not to look at your phone all night. It's rude." Julian watched her leave, his smile fading instantly. He pulled his phone from his tuxedo pocket. A secure message flashed on the screen. Encrypted and read, "Target the Argentum shipment. Dock 4. Midnight. Leave no witnesses." Julian's eyes darkened. Tonight was the night he would finally cripple the rival gang that had been plaguing his operations. He had to make an appearance at the anniversary gala, smile for the cameras, and then slip away to put on the mask. Elena was already in the elevator, checking her own secure device hidden inside her clutch. "Defend shipment. Dock 4. Viper is coming. Kill on sight." Elena's thumb hovered over the screen. She typed a single word. "Understood." Later that night, the midnight rain over the Brooklyn Navy Yard was relentless, turning the concrete into a slick, black mirror. Elena Sterling was no longer the bored socialite sipping champagne. She was the Wraith, perched atop a rusted shipping container. She was a silhouette against the storm, clad in a form-fitting tactical suit woven from impact-resistant weave. Her face was entirely obscured by a silver, featureless ballistic mask. Through the thermal lens, she watched the perimeter of Dock 4. Elena's internal comms crackled. "Wraith. Sensors detect a breach in the south sector. Multiple hostiles." Elena didn't reply. She moved. She didn't run. She flowed, leaping from the container to the wet pavement with a silence that defied physics. She drew her dual batons, electrified and humming with a low menace. Julian Vance moved through the shadows of the south sector like smoke. He wore the signature armor of the Viper matte black plating with jagged, snake-like engravings, His face was hidden behind an obsidian helmet that modulated his vision and voice. He stepped over the unconscious body of an Argentum guard he had just choked out. Julian tapped his earpiece. His voice, a computerized growl. Perimeter breached. I'm moving to the primary target. Burn the shipment. He rounded the corner of a stack of crates and stopped dead. Standing between him and the target container was a figure in silver. The Wraith. The urban legend his syndicate whispered about. Julian tilted his head. Move, he commanded. His voice amplified and distorted into a deep, metallic bass. Or bleed. Elena spun her batons. The electric blue arc sizzling in the rain. She didn't speak. She launched herself at him. The collision was violent. Julian blocked her overhead strike with his reinforced gauntlet, the impact sending a shockwave of water spraying around them. He grunted, surprised by the sheer weight behind the blow. This was no ordinary guard. He countered with a brutal kick to the ribs, aiming for the liver. Elena twisted midair, taking the kick on her thigh instead. Pain shot through her leg, the same leg she had strapped the blade to earlier that evening, but she used the momentum to spin and slash her baton across his chest plate. Sparks flew as the electrified tip gouged a deep scratch into his expensive armor. Julian staggered back, his anger flaring. Fast, he muttered to himself. He drew a serrated combat knife, but not fast enough. For the next 2 minutes, they were a blur of violence. It wasn't a brawl. It was a high-speed chess match played with bone-breaking intent. Elena was agility and precision. Julian was brute force and ruthless efficiency. He managed to grapple her, slamming her against the metal container. His hand closed around her throat, squeezing against the reinforced collar of her suit. Elena gasped, her vision swimming. She drove her knee up, slamming it into his previously injured ribcage, the injury he had nursed with whiskey just hours ago. Julian roared in pain, his grip loosening just enough. Elena didn't hesitate. She activated the taser charge in her glove and palmed his chest. The electric discharge threw Julian backward. He landed heavily in a puddle, gasping for air. His suit systems rebooting. Sirens wailed in the distance. NYPD. The variable neither of them had planned for. Elena looked at the fallen Viper. Her mission was to defend, not to pursue, and her ribs were screaming in agony. She threw a smoke pellet to the ground, enveloping the dock in a thick gray cloud. Julian struggled to his feet, clutching his chest. Through the smoke, the silver figure was gone. He looked down at his chest plate. The scorch mark was shaped like a handprint. Next time, he hissed, limping toward the water to make his escape. Next time, I take your head. An hour later, the master bathroom of the Vance penthouse was a sanctuary of white marble and gold fixtures, currently filled with the hiss of a steaming shower. Elena stood under the scalding water, watching the grime of the Brooklyn docks swirl down the drain. Her body was a map of fresh violence. A massive, purpling bruise bloomed across her right thigh where the Viper's kick had connected. But the worst was her lip, a small but distinct split where the mask had dug into her skin. Elena turned off the water and stepped out, wrapping herself in a thick plush robe. She moved to the mirror, her fingers trembling slightly as she touched the cut on her lip. Concealer wouldn't cover the swelling. She would have to improvise. The heavy oak door of the bedroom creaked open. Julian entered, looking like death warmed over. He had discarded his tuxedo jacket in the hallway. His dress shirt was untucked, damp with sweat. Every breath was a jagged shard of glass in his chest. The electrical burn from the Wraith's taser was a raw, red handprint right over his sternum. Julian paused when he saw Elena emerging from the bathroom. He straightened his spine, forcing his face into a mask of nonchalance, suppressing the urge to vomit from the pain in his fractured ribs. "You're back late," he rasped, his voice rougher than usual. Elena leaned against the vanity, angling her face away from the harsh light. The gala was suffocating. I went for a drive to clear my head. And you, did the business dinner go well? Julian walked to the dresser, moving stiffly. He unbuttoned his shirt with agonizing slowness. Tedious. Negotiations are always a battlefield. He winced as he pulled the shirt off, quickly turning his back to her before she could see the red scorch mark on his chest. He grabbed a fresh pajama top, putting it on with hasty, clumsy movements. Elena watched him through the mirror reflection. Her eyes narrowed. You're limping. Julian. Julian froze. He turned slowly, forcing a charming, tired smile. Old polo injury acting up. The humidity. I suppose. He walked toward her, his eyes scanning her face. His gaze stopped at her mouth. And you. You're bleeding. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She touched her lip casually. Dry skin. I bit it. Nervous habit when I'm thinking about quarterly reports. Julian stepped closer, invading her personal space. The air between them crackled, not with romance, but with the instinct of two predators sniffing for weakness. He reached out, his thumb brushing the corner of her mouth. The touch was gentle, but his eyes were calculating. You should be more careful. Darling, you look like you've been in a war zone. Elena didn't flinch. She reached out and placed her hand flat against his chest directly over the fresh taser burn. Julian's breath hitched. His pupils dilated. It took every ounce of his willpower not to scream as her palm pressed against the raw nerve endings. Elena smiled sweetly, feeling his heart racing like a jackhammer beneath her hand. And you, husband, your heart is beating so fast. Stressed, or just happy to see me? Julian grabbed her wrist, pulling her hand away from his injury. His grip was a fraction too tight. Exhausted. Let's go to bed. The morning sun flooded the breakfast nook of the penthouse, casting a harsh, unforgiving light on the secrets hidden the night before. Elena Sterling sat at the head of the table, dissecting a grapefruit with the precision of a surgeon. She wore a high-necked cashmere sweater, deliberately chosen to hide the faint bruising on her throat, and long sleeves to cover her arms, despite the painkillers she had swallowed with her espresso. Her right leg throbbed with a dull, sickening rhythm. Julian Vance sat opposite her, scrolling through market reports on his tablet. He looked impeccable, in a charcoal three-piece suit, but his movements were robotic. He kept his torso rigid, protecting the fractured ribs that screamed in protest at every breath. Julian lowered his tablet, his eyes scanning Elena over the rim of his coffee cup. You're quiet this morning. Usually. You're critiquing my tie by now. Elena didn't look up from her grapefruit. Your tie is fine. Julian, it's your mood that's hideous. Did the market crash? Or did you just wake up on the wrong side of the bed? Julian forced a tight smile. Just a headache. He reached for the sugar bowl, but the movement pulled at his chest muscles. He flinched, a microscopic spasm of pain crossing his face. The silver spoon clattered loudly against the porcelain saucer. Elena's eyes snapped up. She caught the wince. It was the same way the Viper had flinched when she kicked him. She watched him massage his sternum, the exact spot where she had delivered the taser blast. Are you sure it's just a headache? She asked, her voice dripping with faux concern. You're rubbing your chest. Heartburn. Or did you get into a brawl at your boring dinner? Julian froze. He lowered his hand slowly. Indigestion. The catering was subpar. He shifted the attack. And you're walking with a limp. I heard you stumbling in the hallway at 2 a.m. Elena stiffened. I tripped in the dark. I was trying not to wake you. Clumsy. Julian murmured. His gaze dropped to her right hand as she reached for her water glass. The cashmere sleeve rode up just an inch. There, on the delicate skin of her inner wrist, was a faint, purpling bruise. It was the distinct impression of 4 fingers and a thumb. A grip mark. The exact grip he had used last night when he pinned the Wraith against the container. Julian's blood ran cold. He looked at the bruise. then at Elena's face. The size of the wrist matched. The height matched. But Elena. His cold, corporate wife. It was impossible. Elena saw his eyes fixated on her wrist. She casually pulled her sleeve down, masking the panic rising in her throat. She needed to distract him. Her eyes darted to the floor near the entrance, where the maid hadn't yet cleared the shoe rack. Julian's dress shoes from last night were sitting there. They were cleaned, polished, except for the instep of the left sole, which the brush had missed. Caught in the tread was a smear of gray, oily clay. Elena knew that clay. It was a unique mixture of industrial sludge and silt, found only at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Specifically, Dock 4. She looked back at Julian, her eyes narrowing into slits. He wasn't at a dinner. I have to go. Elena stood up abruptly. Early meeting with the acquisitions team. Julian didn't stand to kiss her goodbye. Of course. Go acquire something. As the elevator doors closed on Elena's stone-cold face, Julian immediately pulled out his encrypted phone. He dialed his head of security. Run a full background check on Elena's movements last night. Traffic cams. GPS. Everything. And get me a sample of the DNA from the knife I used on the Wraith. In the elevator, Elena was already typing a message to her lieutenant. I need the guest list for the Vance Global Charity dinner last night. Cross-reference it with Julian's actual location. And find out if Julian Vance has any private medical records for rib fractures. The marriage was over. The investigation had begun. 2 nights later, the Vance Global Masquerade Ball was a sea of Venetian masks, velvet, and diamonds, held in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Julian Vance stood on the balcony, overlooking the dance floor, a glass of scotch in his hand. He wore a matte black domino mask that barely concealed the predator in his eyes. Earlier that day, he had anonymously tipped off the Argentum Circle that the Viper would be present tonight. If Elena was the Wraith, she would be here, armed and waiting. Elena Sterling entered the room like a blade slicing through silk. She wore a backless gown of midnight blue, the fabric clinging to her curves. Her face was hidden behind a silver filigree mask. She moved with a predatory grace, her eyes scanning the perimeter. Strapped to her thigh, beneath the layers of tulle, was a silenced pistol. Julian descended the staircase. Intercepting her, he offered his hand. Mrs. Vance, you look lethal tonight. Elena took his hand, hair skin cold against his. And you look like a man with secrets. Julian, shall we dance? They moved to the center of the floor, as the orchestra swelled into a haunting waltz. It was a dance of tension. Every step was measured, every turn a test of balance. Julian held her waist firmly, his fingers pressing into the muscles of her back, feeling for the tension of a concealed weapon. You seem tense, Julian whispered, spinning her close, expecting trouble. Elena smiled. A razor-thin curve of red lips. Only from you. Darling, you're leading with your left foot. You're favoring your right side. Still hurting. Julian tightened his grip. He had to know. He signaled the balcony with a subtle nod. Suddenly, the lights flickered. 3 men in waiter uniforms pulled submachine guns from serving trays near the east exit. Screams erupted. The crowd dropped to the floor in panic. It was a staged attack. Julian's mercenaries, paid to fire blanks near the couple to test Elena's reaction. Elena didn't scream. In a split second, the world slowed down. As the first gunman leveled his weapon at Julian, Elena didn't dive for cover. She pivoted. Elena grabbed Julian's lapel, shoving him behind her with shocking strength. With her free hand, she snatched a steak knife from a passing table, spun, and threw it. The blade flew 40 feet and embedded itself precisely in the gunman's shoulder, the non-lethal zone. But a shot that required master-level precision. She didn't stop there. She kicked off her high heels, hiked up her gown, and drew her silenced pistol in one fluid motion, aiming at the second attacker. "Stay down," she commanded, her voice dropping an octave into the cold, metallic tone of the Wraith. The mercenaries froze. This wasn't part of the script. They looked at Julian for orders. Julian stepped out from behind her. He didn't look afraid. He looked triumphant. He slow-clapped, the sound echoing in the stunned silence of the ballroom. "Bravo," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Incredible aim for a woman who supposedly only handles mergers and acquisitions. Elena froze. She realized the gunmen weren't firing. She realized Julian wasn't surprised. She slowly lowered her gun, turning to face him. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "You set this up," she hissed. Julian walked toward her. He stopped inches from her face. "I had to be sure. That knife throw. That stance. I've seen it before. On a rainy dock in Brooklyn." Elena stared at him, the pieces falling into place. The tactical knowledge. The bruises. The ruthlessness. "Viper," she whispered, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. Julian reached up and slowly untied her mask. It fell to the floor. "Hello." "Wraith." He untied his own mask, revealing eyes that were burning with a mix of fury and twisted desire. "It seems we have a lot to discuss. Put the gun away. Elena, unless you plan to finish what you started the other night." The ride home was silent. When the elevator doors to the penthouse slid open, that silence shattered. Julian Vance stormed into the living room, ripping his bow tie loose and throwing it onto the floor. 3 years. Elena, 3 years of sleeping next to me, playing the dutiful wife, while you were running the organization trying to bleed me dry. Elena Sterling followed him out, kicking the door shut with her heel. She didn't retreat. She advanced, her hand still resting near the holster on her thigh. "Don't talk to me about betrayal. Julian, you're the Viper, the man who ordered the bombing of my warehouse in Munich last year. Do you know how many of my people died that night?" Julian laughed. A harsh, barking sound. "Your people. They were smuggling weapons into my territory. I was protecting my assets." Elena grabbed a crystal decanter of whiskey from the bar and hurled it at him. Julian ducked just in time. The heavy crystal smashed into the wall behind him, raining shards of glass and amber liquid onto the expensive Persian rug. He didn't hesitate. He lunged across the room, tackling her. They crashed onto the leather sofa, a tangle of limbs and fury. It wasn't a romantic wrestle. It was a desperate grapple for dominance. Julian pinned her wrists above her head, his weight pressing her down. "I could kill you right now," he snarled, his face inches from hers. "I could snap your neck before you even blink." Elena stared up at him, her eyes cold and fearless. With a sudden twist of her hips, she bucked him off, rolling them over so she was straddling him. In a blur of motion, she drew the ceramic blade from her thigh holster and pressed the tip against his jugular. "And I could open your throat before you take your next breath," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "So do it. Make your move. Viper." They froze. The room was deadly silent, save for their heavy breathing. The blade dug slightly into Julian's skin, drawing a single drop of blood that trickled down his neck onto his white shirt. Julian looked at the woman straddling him, his wife, his enemy, and for the first time in their hollow marriage, he felt something real. It wasn't love. Not yet. It was respect. Terrifying. Electric respect. "We're idiots," he said suddenly. Elena frowned, not lowering the knife. "Excuse me." Julian's eyes narrowed. "Think." "Elena, the ambush at the docks. The tip-off I got tonight about the dignitary. Someone told me you would be there. Someone told you I was moving the shipment. We've been played." Elena's grip on the knife loosened slightly. Her tactical mind began to race, overriding her anger. The consortium. They wanted us to take each other out. If Argentum and Obsidian destroy each other, they take the entire East Coast. Julian nodded slowly. Mutually assured destruction. Elena slowly pulled the knife back. She climbed off him. Standing up and smoothing her ruined dress, she looked at him with a new kind of intensity. So what do you propose? Julian A. Divorce. Julian sat up, wiping the blood from his neck. He looked at the blood on his fingers, then up at her. A dark smile curled his lips. No, a merger. A real one this time. He stood up and walked to the wet bar. Grabbing a bottle of vodka, he took a swig straight from the bottle and held it out to her. We stop hunting each other. We combine our resources. My brute force. Your precision. We find the people who tried to pit us against each other. And we slaughter them. Together. Elena took the bottle. She took a long, burning swallow, her eyes never leaving his. And after that, Julian stepped closer, wiping a smudge of lipstick from her chin with his thumb. After that, we'll see if we still want to kill each other. Deal. Deal, Elena said. But Julian, if you ever point a gun at me again, I won't aim for your chest. Julian smirked. Understood. Mrs. Vance. 1 week later. The heavy oak doors of the consortium's private sanctuary, a fortress disguised as a vineyard in upstate New York, exploded inward. Julian Vance walked through the smoke, a modified assault rifle in his hands. His tuxedo jacket discarded. His white dress shirt rolled up to reveal the tattoos of the Obsidian Syndicate winding up his arms. He didn't take cover. He marched forward, firing with a rhythmic, terrifying precision that cleared the hallway of guards in seconds. Clear left. Julian shouted over the roar of gunfire, reloading his weapon with a smooth cant. Practiced motion. Elena Sterling slid across the polished marble floor past him, dual pistols blazing. She was a blur of motion. Using Julian's massive frame as a moving shield, she popped up from behind his shoulder, taking 2 headshots at snipers on the balcony that Julian couldn't see. Clear right. Elena called back, her voice calm, almost bored. She spun, holstering one pistol to throw a flashbang into the main chamber. 3 seconds. Darling. Julian grinned, shielding his eyes as the grenade detonated with a blinding flash. After you. Sweetheart. They breached the main hall together. It was a massacre. But it was also a masterpiece. For years, they had been the apex predators of their respective jungles, solitary and lonely. Now, fighting side by side, they were a force of nature. When Julian ran out of ammo, he didn't panic. He simply tossed his rifle to Elena, who caught it midair, emptied the clip into a rushing wave of enemies, and tossed it back just as he slapped in a fresh magazine. They moved like dancers. Julian was the anchor, the brutality, the storm. Elena was the wind, the blade, the silence. Finally, they kicked open the doors to the inner sanctum. Chairman Thorne, the puppet master who had tried to orchestrate their mutual destruction, sat behind his mahogany desk, trembling, tornestemmel, backing away toward the window. This is impossible. Oil and water don't mix. The Viper and the Wraith cannot coexist. Julian stepped forward. Blood spattered across his cheekbone. Looking more like a demon than a CEO, he placed his hand on the desk, leaning in. That's where you're wrong. Thorne, we aren't oil and water. Elena stepped up beside her husband, linking her arm through his. She rested her head on Julian's blood-stained shoulder, raising her pistol to aim directly at Thorne's forehead. We are fire and gasoline, and you just lit the match. Thorne opened his mouth to beg, but the sound was cut short. 2 gunshots rang out as one. Perfect synchronization. The silence that followed was heavy and sweet, Julian holstered his weapon and turned to Elena. He reached out, his rough, calloused hand cupping her face. He looked at the woman who had tried to kill him a week ago. The woman who had lied to him for 3 years. And he felt a surge of adoration so strong it nearly brought him to his knees. "You missed a spot," he murmured, wiping a speck of blood from her forehead with his thumb. Elena smiled. A genuine, radiant smile that he had never seen in all their years of marriage. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him a deep, bruising kiss amidst the ruin and the bodies of their enemies. It tasted of adrenaline and iron. "Let's go home, Julian," Elena whispered against his lips. "I believe we have a merger to finalize. And I think the board of directors needs a restructuring." Julian chuckled, wrapping his arm around her waist as they walked out of the burning estate, stepping over the debris of their old lives. "Whatever you say, Mrs. Vance, whatever you say." Outside, the night sky was clear. They got into their car, hand in hand, driving away from the inferno. They were no longer just a CEO and a socialite playing house. They were the kings and queens of the underworld. And for the first time, the ring on Elena's finger didn't feel like a shackle. It felt like a promise. The end.